that has been told. Like, the number one lie that you was told in school was the South wanted to succeed because they didn't want to let their slaves free. To a certain degree, they're right, but that's a partial truth. That is not the whole truth in it. The North did not just fight the South because they wanted to succeed. The South wanted nothing to do with the North. The South wanted to be its own country, no matter what. And if the North was so concerned about letting your ancestors free, slaves, black people of America, why they didn't let none of their slaves free? They gonna tell the South to let their slaves free, but then they don't want to let their slaves free. That don't make no sense right there. So it was a big lie over the Civil War. The South wanted to succeed because they wanted to become their own great nation, and you see the North was not having that. Either it be the textile industry, either it be factories, what have you. It was not just over some slaves. It was not. The slaves, my ancestors, was not the reason of the catalyst that forced these two different states to go into war. It's all over money. And if money would have not been a factor in it, it'd probably still be slavery to this day. And I'm just being honest. Now, they don't tell you that the Native Americans fought on the South Side because they didn't want to let none of their slaves free either. So it's a lot of our history that is not taught. And if it's our history, we should take pride in all American history. But it seems like to me, when it comes to my people, none of the truths are being set forth. Now, look how cold the Civil War was, family. You had blacks fighting from the North, fighting their own brothers from the South. You know what I'm saying? You got brother against brother killing each other over, you could say flags or you could say money, however you look at it. But we had to kill our own brothers in that war. So when people tell me about well, we lost a lot of different people when we fought in the Civil War, shouldn't that be payment enough? You don't want to tell the whole story. My people fought on both sides of your war and died just like you did. So yeah. Okay, now okay, we covered it. That was the Civil War. You had blacks fighting against on the South. You had blacks on the North. But in schools, public schools, they only gonna tell you about the blacks on the North fighting. That's it. The ball drops off right there. And the South, brother against brother. When white folks fought the British to gain their independence, you had blacks fighting with America. Then you had the blacks that wanted their freedom that fought with the British. So once more again, you got black people killing black people for somebody else's freedom. Because in this situation, in independence, our people wasn't set free. But you still had black folks killing their own brothers. Brother against brother for somebody else's war. But they don't talk about that. They don't talk about the Seminole Indian War. Why is that for? Why if we fought, now I'm talking about the Trail of Tears, I'm talking about the civilized Indian nations that they forced over to Oklahoma. Now, that was a big war right there. And it was a lot of lives lost over it. But this war right here was started, slavery was a catalyst of it. It was in there too. Slavery was a catalyst. The Native American folks, the ones that were good to black people, the Seminole Indians, they merged together to be one nation. You know what I'm saying? They merged together to be one nation. So when they fought against black and Indians, but the war lasted for a long period of time. But it's not taught in American history. There's no mention of it. I have never heard of no Seminole War. They'll tell you about the Trail of Tears. They'll tell you about them marching and marching them to Oklahoma, but they will not tell you about the wars that was invested in, why the war was. Why did we go to war for? Why did we do this? It's not taught. And I feel that that's an injustice done because you got so many different Americans that would gain more sense of respect for everybody's nationhood if the history was taught right. Let's go down to the Spanish War. Now, everybody knows there was no slavery in Mexico. There was no slavery at all in Mexico. So you had certain different slave holders that would go down to Texas and places like that and bring them slaves there. But then the Mexican government wasn't having that because there was no slavery in Mexico. So as you look at the whole west coast of the United States of America, and our people ran to Mexican territory for freedom. That is not taught in school. They don't say nothing about the Mexican American, why it was started, what was over. So when you do your research and you come to an understanding that it's a lot of big gaps in our history, and a lot of people don't like to talk about it. They don't like to talk about it. They don't like to mention it. But this is where the hostility comes from, because people are not taught their history correctly. You know what I'm saying? This is where the hostility comes from. Race against race, person against person, ethnicity against ethnicity. It all falls on history. Now in school, they never taught me about the reason why. They didn't even tell me that the first president of Mexico was a runaway slave. You know what I'm saying? A runaway slave, the first president. So when people say Obama is the first black president, that's a lie. The first black president was the president of Mexico. So yeah, let's go back up in this. Now in the Mexican American War, it was over slavery and dominion. But now as you look at the hostile relationships between the different races, you don't see no alliance. You don't see no compassion. You don't see no joining of the people. And I'm telling you right now, a lot of this comes from the injustice when it comes to telling people about American history. It's like they only focus on the great attributes of Americans. That's it. But when it comes to everybody else, they don't give a damn about your history. It means nothing to them, because their history ends up telling you the truth on who you are, what you are, where you came from, and what great things your people have done in the time that they have been here. Like a lot of these wars that I'm talking about, just like from the Civil War to the British War to the Seminole War to the Mexican American War, ain't none of this really taught properly like in school. It's just not taught proper like, and it's a lot of holes, and it's like partial truth. It's not the full truth. Now, this was my thoughts last night as I was thinking about America. America is like playing the game of music chairs. When the music stops and you don't have a seat, you asked out. Now look at America, family. Look at America. I mean, look long and hard and close. Isn't America like the game of musical chairs? It'd be like this. People will live in one area, then they either get tired of living in that area, or they numbers start diminishing, and then they leave that area, and then a whole nother people, a whole different ethnicity will come and move in that area. Then they will move out. Then another group will move in the same damn area. So to me, America is like playing the game of musical chairs. When the music stops and you ain't got no seat, your ass is assed out. That's the po folks. That's the people that don't have nothing. That's the people who's living out on the street and homeless and whatnot. Okay, what else did we have today? Now, from my understanding, I'll read what I wrote and then you tell me what you think. When I heard that white folks was scared of white genocide, I thought it was a joke. But I didn't know how serious they really was. So I did my research last night. So let's go over it. Now check this out. When I heard about white genocide, I started thinking about America. Like, man, if you know what the definition of genocide is, that's everything the American government has done to my people. Genocide. Go through it. Go look at your Webster's dictionary and just go through what is the definition of genocide and every single thing that was listed in there. And I want you to get a bigger understanding of the vocabulary, not just that little bit that they gonna tell you. What did they say? One group trying to exterminate another group of power and resources. Nah. Go deeper into it of what genocide truly is. And it will show you every single thing that was done to my people. Now check this out, family, loved ones that listen to me. Not only did your people have to endure genocide through the United States government, they actually did biological warfare and testing on us. So not only did we have the nation of America doing genocide on my people, black people of America, they also did biological warfare. And some people be like, oh man, you lying, you don't know what you're talking about. If that's the case, then what happened to the brothers in Tuskegee? And I could be pronouncing that wrong, but the Tuskegee Airmen, go ahead and do your research on that, and you tell me if that's not biological warfare. And if they did those military people like that with biological warfare, what else have they done? You know what I'm saying? You already got the genocide kicking off, then you got the biological warfare. Man, it's like, if you don't see this as modern day Egypt, I don't know what to tell you. You know what I'm saying? Especially when it pertains to your people, I don't know what to say to you. So as I look at when they first told me about white genocide, I looked at, I laughed. You know what I'm saying? I laughed because I was all like, man, who the all right? You know what I'm saying? What is they saying now? What the KKK members? What are they saying? The all right? What is they saying now? White genocide? They really serious upon this because it's really happening to them. And as I look at this world and things that have been done to my people, payback is a motherfucker. It is. Payback is a bitch. And it will come back and bite you in your ass. So I remember God had asked Jehoshaphat to do some shows for America last week or the week before, and every single thing that I said in that is going to come to pass for American people if they don't get their stuff together. Like right now, I feel that American people, they need to be making a whole lot of things right with the people whoever would call themselves a minority. I feel America needs to get right with us. You know what I'm saying? Whoever is the minority. You know what I'm saying? Whoever. Now, I really didn't take it serious. I really didn't. And as I look at all the church bombings and shootings and stuff like that, they should have been doing that to abortion clinics, because that's one of the hardest things that they losing their birth rate over is them abortion clinics. And they have forced their people with the mindset of, oh, well, you need to opt out of getting married and having children, and you need to go get a dog, and children, they too expensive. Do you know children is the most joyous thing that anybody can bring in this world? I mean, if you have a family and you have children, you got a wife, you got a husband, and you got your kids, that is the best thing you could ever do for society, because it ensures the survival of your race. You know what I'm saying? It ensures the survival. So by you having a family and having kids, that's one of the greatest things that you could ever do with your life. I can't see it any other way besides from that, because you're leaving something behind. Now these people have been fed, you don't need to have no kids, you need to worry about yourself, but that's killing you on your birth rate. I mean, that's really hurting you. Like with my folks, one of the real reasons why our numbers is not up there like they was back in the 60s, back in the 70s, is because of that damn Margaret Mason abortion clinics. You know what I'm saying? That's one of the reasons why our numbers are the way that they are. Along with and when I say black on black crime, everybody got their own. It's white on white crime, it's Asian on Asian crime, it's Mexican on Mexican crime, it's Italian on Italian crime. Everybody has their crime on each other. Everybody. So when I say black on black crime, it's something actual that I'm talking about. You know what I'm saying? So with black on black crime, and then you got our sisters going over to those abortion clinics, killing our babies. Those are the two main reasons why our numbers are the way that they are, and everybody else is passing this up. If you took out those two things, our race of people would rise in numbers over, it'd be like over a 15 year period. You wouldn't be no 13% no more, you would be more like 26%. But young black babies is getting killed over them abortion clinics. So I don't understand when white folks come, and I'm just talking about racist white people, I'm not talking about good white people, I'm talking about racist white people. There is a difference. When racist white people, family, they keep on breaking up on me, but we almost finished here. Let's go back at the top of this list. Mass drug use that leads to suicide and depression. Abortion clinic that kills your babies before they even get born. I wish that every single abortion clinic was closed down. I really do. People trying to rape little kids, man, these people right here, they're a special type of evil. You know what I'm saying? Why would you be trying to have sex with a little kid, all in the schools, trying to force them to be a way that you want them to be? I thought that they was the parents' kids. I thought that your kids was supposed to be tutored, mentored, and taught by the parents, not the schools. So in the schools, they pushing this agenda, but in all actuality, it's killing their own people. It's killing them because gay folks don't procreate. They don't. But they pushing it on the children to be gay at a young age, and this is the reason why they're dying off. This is the reason why there is more white Americans dying than actually being born in this country, because things like this is the cripple part. This is what's making them this is their clutch. This is the handicap. This is the enabler right here that's forcing the birth rate all the way down. Okay, you made it legal for females to get married. Now you got all these white women out here that's not going to a white man to produce children, to procreate, to have children and get the birth number up. No, you made it legal for them to marry another woman, so they don't see no fit of white women's messing with a white man. You know what I'm saying? You made lesbianism legal. That's number 6. Number 7, gay. You got all these white men having sex with other men. How can you procreate? How can you up your numbers if you made being gay legal? You know what I'm saying? This is the crutch right here. This is the handicap. You can't have large number of people if you have men out there that's not procreating with their own women. You know what I'm saying? This is the reason why. And then it falls back down to suicide. There is a lot of white people who are killing themselves. They're actually killing themselves because they sad over, I can't find a wife, I can't find a husband. Then you throw in drug use up in there, and then you got suicide. You know what I'm saying? Straight up, you got straight up suicide right there. So that's my 8-point reason why Americans is losing their birth rate right there. Now, the two that affect my people is drug use and abortion clinics. Those are the one of the two. I gotta throw in black on black crime too. Like I said though, everybody got their crime. White got white on white crime. Black people got black on black crime. Asians got Asian on Asian crimes. Mexicans got Mexican on Mexican crime, and so forth. So as I did all my research last night, and I could have came up here with numbers and stuff, but when you do your research on this, you're gonna find out the same thing that I found out, that when you look at the future of America here in this country, the only thing that my people have to do to beat racism is to have more babies. That's the only thing we have to do. And then the people who are actually being racist, their birth rate is going out. You know what I'm saying? As you look at all of the European countries, all of them are having the same problem. Why is that? Because of the laws that they are passing. They're passing. So you can't blame God. You can't blame the earth. You can't blame the sun. You can't blame some disease. You have to blame your own self. You have to blame your own self because you forged these things to be a law. And these things are devastating for any people, a race of people that's trying to procreate. Now, they say like the average to keep a society at its peak, it's got to be, the birth rate got to be like 2.2. But Americans and all these other European countries, they're falling down under that number. So when we look at the future of America, there will not be no racism here in America. I give it about 25 years, 25 to 30 years. I won't have to worry about racism like that. I won't have to worry about white supremacy like that. I won't. All I got to do is just sit back and get me a good sister and have about 5 more kids. That's what my plan is. So I'm telling my people out there, have as many babies as you want. Our future depends on it. You know what I'm saying? Have as many, if you want to fight against racism, have as many kids as you possibly can. Now, there's a lot of people out there that would say that I'm wrong, but I felt as I handled this situation of all the topics that I have brought before you, I have tried to be extremely polite. I have not tried to be biased in any shape, form, or fashion, and I tried to be respectful. But it's a lot of people out there that be like, oh, he's a racist, he's so racist, he said those things, he wished death on him. No, I don't. No, I really don't. I really don't. I would never let racism get to the point with me to where I hate another person. I hate racism because I have to deal with it. I don't hate everybody. If you're doing something to me, then I got a reason not to like your ass. But if you ain't doing nothing to me, I don't have no problems with you. You know what I'm saying? I love all people, all shapes, all forms. I thank God for all the different shades of color that he put on this earth. I really do. I thank him for it. I thank him for the black people, for the white people, for the Mexican people, for the Asian people, for the Arabian people. I thank him for all the different faces of man. I'm not a racist. You know what I'm saying? When white people come on my channel, right? And they be throwing all of that, you're racist, you're so evil, you're the devil, you're this, you're that, you're Satan himself. And I look at my life and I think about all the white people, all the Mexican people, all the Asian people, all of my people that I didn't help throughout the years. If I can help you, I'm going to help you. But if I can't help you, I'm not going to be worried about it. You feel me on that? So as I look at when white people tell me I'm racist, do you know how many white people I have helped in my life? You know what I'm saying? Do you know how many Mexican people I have helped in my life? So I sit back and I laugh and amaze because like I told y'all on shows in my past, the rich don't help poor people. Poor people help other poor people. Man, this has been your brother Fatboy Fish. This show feel good to be back. But I just had to hit y'all with this topic for y'all to think about for today. And I meant everything that I say, even though people gonna say I'm so wicked for saying it. That's their problem. Now, peace and blessings to all my people out there in the world, for this is your brother Fat.
The history of the world has ever known about its ancestors. There'll be photographs, of course, black and white and color, audio cassettes, and in a few families, 8 and 16 millimeter film. And there will be thousands upon thousands of miles of videotape on which we will have recorded everything that struck us as interesting or funny or important about the milestones of our lives and those of our friends and families. They will be able to see and hear us long after we are dead. Imagine if we could only do the same. If we could only bring back the voices and images, and most important of all, the memories of those who lived 100 or more years ago. Well, brace yourselves for a minor miracle. For reasons I'll explain as we go along, we have the voices and the memories and a few black and white photographs to go along of some men and women who were born, some of them 150 years ago. And what makes these recollections all the more remarkable is that these men and women had been bought and sold like so much livestock.
Tell you the truth, when I think of it today, I don't know how I'm living.
I remember that just as well. Look like to me, I can.
Been slaves all our lives. My mother was a slave, my sister was a slave, father was a slave.
They know nothing about reading right. All that I know, they teach you to mind your master and your missus. Mom and them didn't know where to go. You see, after she would go, just like you turn something out, you know, didn't know where to go.
They are haunting voices from the past. Not actors reading a script or scholars reading a text, but the actual voices of men and women, Americans, who were born in slavery.
My name is Fountain Hughes. I was born in Charlottesville, Virginia. My grandfather belonged to Thomas Jefferson. My grandfather was 115 years old when he died. And now I am 101 years old.
Incredible as it seems, we are listening to the voices of ex-slaves telling of their lives in bondage. Men like Fountain Hughes on the living conditions of slaves in Virginia in the 1860s when he was a teenager.
Other people didn't have no beds when they were slaves. You all slept on the floor. Had it here, had it there. Just like a lot of wild people. We didn't know nothing. Didn't like to look at no book.
Women like Laura Smalley, describing the makeshift church where slaves worshipped on a big plantation in East Texas.
All the church would have be a tub of water sitting just like this thing is, you know, and that would catch your voice, and they would have church around that tub, all of them get around the tub.
Or Harriet Smith, remembering what she saw as a small girl during the final days of the Civil War.
We stood on that picket fence all day long, seeing them soldiers going back to San Antonio and different places. Colored soldiers in droves. That's right along by our house. Our home is a two-story house, a white folk.
These recorded memories were among thousands of interviews done with ex-slaves in the 1930s and 40s. The majority were written interviews published in pamphlets and books. A handful were recorded on the latest equipment of the day, 200-pound portable recorders that a hearty band of folklorists lugged across the South.
You rather go free, you know. That, of course, but I have...
These recordings, once scratchy, distant, filled with the crackle and pop of that primitive equipment,
Nothing worries me. My head ain't even white.
now have been cleaned up through the magic of modern technology, digitized.
I'm the oldest one that I know that's living.
The age of the computer has reached back to polish a memory from another century,
No.
150 years ago.
Can you remember slavery days very
Of
well?
course, I remember all our white folks, and all the names of them, all the children. Call every one of the children's names.
Who did you belong to?
Jim Button, the baby boy.
The results of these digitally enhanced recordings are arresting, almost unbelievable. The idea of hearing the voices of actual slaves from the plantations of the Old South is as powerful, as startling really, as if you could hear Abraham Lincoln or Robert E. Lee speak. Listen again to Fountain Hughes, who was born in 1848.
We were slaves. We belonged to people. They sell us like they sell horses and cows and hogs and all like that. Have an auction bench and they put you up on the bench and bid on you the same as you're bidding on cattle, you know.
Much of what these three former slaves say may at first seem unremarkable. Much of what they say may surprise and upset, and their calm demeanor is at odds with the evil and violence we associate with slavery. Here is 91-year-old Texan Laura Smalley talking in the 1940s about the outcome of a tussle between two women, one black, one white, one slave, one mistress. The mistress tried to slap the slave, but the black woman pushed her into a chair. Laura Smalley was a girl at the time, but she remembers vividly what happened to the black woman when the master came home.
But I think that poor old woman carried in the peach orchard and whipped her. And, you know, just tied her hand this way, you know, around the peach orchard tree. I remember that just as well, looked like to me, I can't, and round the tree and whipped her. And well, she couldn't do nothing but just kick her feet, you know, just kick her feet. But it just had her clothes off down to her waist, you know. Just didn't have her plumb naked, but they had her clothes down to her waist. And every now and then they'd whip her, you know, and then snuff the pipe out on her, you know. She snuffed pipe out on her. You know, the embers in the pipe. I don't know where you ever see the pipe smoking.
Blow them out on her?
Mm-hmm.
Good Lord, have mercy.
What is remarkable in the taped recollections of these ex-slaves is the lack of anger. Remember, though, that these are the recollections of people who were children or teenagers during slavery. Remember, too, how intimidating it is for most of us today to have a microphone or camera thrust at us and to be asked questions on the street. It must have been even more daunting for poor blacks living in a highly segregated South to be asked by white strangers using a strange machine to talk candidly about being slaves. For all that, it is startling how much the ex-slaves reveal. Fear, hunger, unrelenting work, but also fondness for masters, perhaps even love. Harriet Smith's family, for example, were the only slaves of an East Texas farmer and his family. They lived in a cabin next to their masters, in circumstances not markedly different, even attended the same church, only at different times.
I went to Mountain City to the white folks' church many times. See, the white folks would have church in the morning, then they'd let the colored people have church at their church in the evening.
During slavery.
During slave time.
Laura Smalley lived in the same area of Texas as Harriet Smith, near the Brazos River, one of more than 100 slaves on a big cotton plantation. Religion offered no consolation to the slaves here because the master forbade them the practice of religion, and there was hell to pay if the master caught them at prayer.
They don't have no church. No, they didn't have no church. And the old master come along with one of them. One of them was there having church around the tub, and he's down praying. The old master come in, he just a praying. He come in, he did, and told him get up from there. He didn't get up, he just a praying. He said the old master come in, so whooping him. He quit praying and then asking the Lord have mercy on the old master. The old master was whooping with a bullwhip. He said, have mercy on the old master. And that old master whooped him, and he kept up, wouldn't get up, just flinch, just like a person, when a person hits you, with a flinch. He just prayed for old master. The old master stepped back and said, I'm ready minded to kick you naked. I'm ready minded to kick you naked. Nigga never stopped praying, he had to go off and leave him praying. He'd go off and leave him praying, because he wouldn't stop.
The plantation on which Smalley was a slave sounds brutal. She recalls scrambling with other children for food from a huge wooden tray, like a hog trough.
All of them, would get around that tray with spoons and eat, such like mush or soup or something like that. And all them children get around there and just eat.
Fountain Hughes tells his interviewer about the relentless round of work for him on a Virginia plantation.
Night never comes out. You have nothing to do. Time to cut tobacco. If they want you to cut all night long out in the field, you cut. And if they want you to hang all night long, you hang tobacco. It didn't matter about your tired, being tired, you're afraid to say you're tired.
It was cotton, not tobacco, that solidified slavery, though. The invention of the cotton gin at the end of the 18th century made its processing easy, but the crop still needed enormous amounts of unskilled labor. Control of the slave and his labor through laws and regulations became paramount. Fountain Hughes talks about one of those controls, the pass system.
Now, I couldn't go from here across the street, or I couldn't go to nobody's house without I have a note or something from my master. And if I had that pass, that was what we call a pass. If I had that pass, I could go wherever he sent me, and I'd have to be back. Whoever he sent me to, they'd give me another pass, and I'd bring that back, so to show how long.
Even emancipation didn't truly free the slaves. Freedom freed slaves for more travail. The end of the Civil War found many cast adrift without skills and no place to go. And the Yankees who freed them weren't always seen as benevolent liberators.
I remember when the Yankees come along and took all the good horses and took sold all the meat and flour and sugar and stuff out in the river and let it go down the river. And they know the people wouldn't have nothing to live on, but they done that.
The ex-slaves left one hell for another, perhaps an even more dangerous one. No longer property, they didn't have the protections afforded property.
When we were slaves, we couldn't do that, see? And if we got free, we didn't know nothing to do. And my mother, she hunted places and bound us out for $1 a month, but we didn't have no property, we didn't have no home. We had nowhere, nothing. We didn't have nothing on it, just like the cattle, we just turned out and get along the best you could.
In Texas, the slaves weren't told they were free until 2 months after the war ended. Smalley remembers that her masters gave the slaves a dinner, and then they were free.
I don't know how the other side of the folks know freedom. We didn't know. They just thought, we're just feeding us, Them didn't know where to go. You see, after freedom broke, just like you turned something out, didn't know where to go. That's just where they stayed. Didn't know where to go. Turn us out just like, you turn out cattle.
In the narratives, the slaves used an interesting phrase for the end of slavery. They say, when the break came. Good times, easy times were not at hand. The trials for millions of black Americans didn't end in 1865. They continued. Laura Smalley and her family became sharecroppers. Harriet Smith's first husband was killed by whites during the Reconstruction, probably because of his political organizing. Fountain Hughes went north to Baltimore and worked at numerous jobs, including hauling manure. Not an enviable job, but it was the job of a free man. John Henry Falk was among those who interviewed ex-slaves. Falk kept detailed notebooks of his travels and interviews with former slaves, and even tried once to pass for black. He told an interviewer just before his death in 1979,
I really ought get and become educated on blacks and their problems, except we call them colored folks.
If some of you think you recognize the name John Henry Falk, you're right. He was a famous radio personality in the 1950s. He was also denounced and eventually blacklisted for, among other things, championing the rights of blacks to vote. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. We can thank the Depression for the existence of the slave narratives. That is when John Henry Falk, folklorist John Lomax, his son Alan, and writers like Zora Neale Hurston, the celebrated Harlem Renaissance writer, were touring the South to gather accounts of African-American folk traditions. The subject of slavery was not on their minds.
Nobody was going around saying, oh, now we've got another former slave recording. But then little by little, they started becoming a category.
Known to scholars and linguists, the audio tapes of the ex-slaves have been in the archives of the Library of Congress and various libraries around the country since the late 1940s. Kathy Farnell, who works with the Institute of Language and Culture in Clanton, Alabama, is one of the people responsible for the clarity of the ex-slave narrative tapes, now part of a recently released audio and book package called Remembering Slavery, produced by the Smithsonian Institution and Public Radio International.
What I found out was that the technology did not exist to bring these recordings up to broadcast quality by taking out the background static. That technology got invented in the early 1990s.
Hearing the tapes had a profound effect on everyone who worked with them.
I was truly amazed when I first heard the recorded interviews.
I just fell in love with Fountain. He had the type of emotions that I really liked. He had anger, and so it felt good to me. It validated for me my feeling that this was a horrible, horrible thing to happen to any people.
But John Henry Falk may have experienced the most profound effect. He was a graduate student when he interviewed the former slaves, including the two women you hear in this broadcast. Himself interviewed just before he died in 1979, Falk was going on about how he believed in giving blacks the right to go to school, giving them the right to vote, giving them the right to go into anything they qualified for. And then he said he experienced an epiphany.
I was sitting out on a wagon tongue with this old black man, and was telling him what a different kind of white man I was. I remember him looking at me very sadly and kind of sweetly and condescending and said, "You know, you still got the disease, honey. I know you think you're cured, but you're not cured. You can't give me the right to be a human being. I'm born with that right. Now, you can keep me from having that. If you've got all the policemen and all the jobs on your side, you can deprive me of it. But you can't give it to me, because I was born with it just like you was." My God, it had a profound effect on me. I was furious with him. But the more I reflected on it, the more profoundly it affected me. And I realized this was where it really was.
But the final word belongs to Fountain Hughes. When asked by his interviewer which he would rather be, free or slave, he answered with intensity.
Me? Which I'd rather be? You know what I'd rather do? If I thought, had any idea, that I'd ever be a slave again, I'd take a gun and just end it all right away. Because you're nothing but a dog. You're not a thing but a dog.
I'll be back with a closing thought in a moment. At a time when we're inclined to minimize or even forget the scale of past injustices, the voices we've heard tonight have an importance far beyond their number. Professor Orlando Patterson of Harvard has written that it is not surprising that freedom and the love of it have often been born in slave-holding societies. In ancient Greece, to cite one example, among the slave-holding founders of our own country, to cite another. The existence of slavery in such societies, says Professor Patterson, elevates freedom, makes it more precious, more valuable, not only to those who are not free, but to those who are. This broadcast, I'd like to add, was lovingly compiled and largely created by our own senior producer, Karen DeWitt. That's our report for tonight. I'm Ted Koppel in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
Then, you know, in our textbooks, the Civil War is written up all wrong. It was originally called the War Between the States, and it had nothing to do with slavery. It had everything to do with states' rights and whether the states had the right to secede from the Union when they didn't agree with everything that was happening.
No, that's not true.
Then what is
the
true?
States did have the right to secede from the Union, and they did, and nobody was stopping them, and everything was fine until a bunch of people who wanted to have a war with the Union fired upon Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor.
So as long as there wouldn't have been a first shot,
if the South had never fired on the North, there would never have been a Civil War, period.
That's fascinating.
It sure is.
Yes, it is.
They're teaching junk in our schools, lies, crap. They teach blacks that the Civil War was fought over slavery. And the blacks look to Lincoln as their hero. Lincoln didn't want to free the slaves. In fact, he said that he was never going to do that. Until the North got in big, big trouble. They were on the brink of actually losing the war. The Southern Army was on the doorstep of Washington, D.C.
Yes.
And the federal agencies were packing up, getting ready to flee to the North. When Lincoln gave the Emancipation Proclamation in the hopes that the slaves would rise up against their Southern masters. But it didn't happen.
No.
Almost everybody in this country is laboring under lies, deceptions. They're ignorant.
They're sending a message to the world that the American democracy system is a lie. They have no honor. None. All your ancestors, as well as mine, fought and paid for that right in blood. That's what them stripes on that flag represent. Yeah. Well, when you wake up, we're going to hate you for the 6 million Indians your ancestors slaughtered. Yet we joined you in wars and made this country great. And this is how you repay us. You violate our treaties, desecrate our gravelands. For what? Corporate entities who want to get rich. All of you will suffer. It's not just us. You will suffer. Your children will suffer. When the corporate entities control the water in the world, shame on this country. The world is watching.
Mirabeau B. Lamar. Lamar, like Houston, was a friend and follower of Andrew Jackson, but the two men did not get along very well. Lamar is sometimes called the poet president because he wrote poetry, was very literate, and he also made some speeches about the importance of Texas education. However, to be clear, he never really implemented any educational policies. And so the father of Texas education as a name for him is really kind of overstated a little bit. Lamar figured that since Texas was going to be an independent republic, it should really be an empire. It was a tremendous amount of land that Texas claimed. They claimed all of the Rio Grande and the watershed there up to the Adams-Onis Treaty Line. So it was a tremendous amount of land. He moved the capital away from Houston, for one reason, because he didn't want it to be named after Sam Houston. And the second is he wanted it to be further west. And so he moved it to a place called Waterloo, which today we call Austin, and he named it after Stephen F. Austin, because Stephen F. Austin had recently passed away. One of the other things that Lamar did was finance a trip to try to bring Santa Fe into Texas proper. And so he sent the so-called Santa Fe expedition. This was a tremendous waste of money. It never amounted to anything. People got lost. There were some issues with lack of water, and it ended miserably. And it was a big waste of time. However, Lamar was successful in getting international recognition for the Republic of Texas. Both England and France, intent on seeing the United States stopped from expanding all the way to the Pacific, were happy to have a large independent republic blocking the way of the United States from going to the Pacific, and also because of their association with Mexico. Finally, the debt issue. The Santa Fe expedition and other wastes of money plagued Lamar's administration. The fact is that Texas just didn't have that much money. They had plenty of land, but not much money. And so one of the things that they did was build in a new impresario system. And this was to attract more settlers to Texas to sell off more land. But the land was being sold very cheaply, so it really didn't bring in much money. The other thing that Texas did, and this is an illustration of the problem of debt that many people in Texas faced. There was a homestead exemption passed. Now, what the homestead exemption does, this says is that regardless of how much debt you owe, the land you live on cannot be taken away. The land you homestead on cannot be taken away and sold to pay off your debts. This is a protection for debtors, and this was written into the state's constitution. We still have that here in Texas today because the amount of land that you live on, your homestead, is considered very important. The second administration of Sam Houston, he was re-elected to be president, was plagued by debt. A lot of this was built up again during the Lamar administration, and Sam Houston, in fact, had to pay some bills for the government out of his own pocket. He also had to put up his own personal credit line in order to get loans. He was also plagued by invasions from Mexico. Remember, Mexico did not recognize independence of Texas, and so in their mind, it was kind of like a rebellion that they needed to put down. And so Adrian Wall, one of Mexico's generals, invaded. This was the second invasion and it launched the so-called Muir Expedition. This was a retaliation that Texas soldiers marched out to try to chase Wall out and then go down into Mexico and cause problems on their own. This also ended horribly. And in fact, it led to the so-called Black Bean Affair, where 17 Texans were executed. Now, actually, the Mexican government wanted them all killed. However, Mexican military generals pleaded for mercy, and so they just killed 17, which was what we would call a decimation. 1 in 10 of the soldiers were executed. This is the so-called Black Bean Affair. They pulled out a bag of white beans, and there were 17 black beans in there, and whoever pulled out the black bean was shot. Later on, the survivors brought back the remains of the executed and buried them in today what is LaGrange, Texas, above LaGrange, and there's a monument there in their honor. Also illustrative of the problems that Houston faced was the so-called Archive War. During Wool's invasion, Mexican troops were in San Antonio, which isn't very far away from Austin. Houston moved the administration back to Houston, Texas, and he told the state archivist, and the archives holds the important papers of the state, to come with him. Well, the archivist refused, and so this battle of wills, this contest between Houston and the archivist, led to the so-called Archive War, and it shows, along with the Army's expedition, and the Muir Expedition, it shows that there was a lot of people who didn't think that they had to follow the rules of the government and began to argue and to complain. And this were some of the problems that Houston faced. Also, the question of annexation arose again, and Houston was able to bring Mexico and begin discussing problems relating to annexation with Mexico and with the United States, and those issues began to be ironed out a little bit. The last administration, the last presidential administration for the Republic of Texas, was Anson Jones's presidential administration. Anson Jones, a medical doctor, oversaw the Republic of Texas during the annexation period. And at this time, although the British and French were opposed, Mexico was able to finally allow the United States to annex Texas without any problems and to agree to the independence of Texas. And so at the end of Jones's administration, he is really the last president and lowers the Texas flag in favor of the United States flag. And there's an illustration in your book that shows this. In 1872, an artist named John Gass painted this picture. It's called American Progress, and it shows and it illustrates westward movement, settlers coming in, being guided by the spirit of progress. And this goes very well with a flavor of the times from the 1820s and 30s and 40s all the way up to the 1890s, that of manifest destiny. Manifest destiny is this idea that the United States has to constantly move further and further west, the sea to shining sea,